I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
What can we do to work smarter, not harder?
Japan needed to do this for survival.
Japan did it, we can do it.
We make steel at a lower cost than any steel company in the world, including the Japanese.
It's not the American worker, as far as I can determine. That's a major part of the problem of productivity.
With 27 different agencies, each having their own little fiefdom, and promulgating dozens of rules a month.
The law of the land is such that it's illegal now for fish to go potty in the water.
This program is about the strongest, most productive economic force the world has ever known, the United States. We have been for a long time. There are reminders of that here in the Smithsonian's Museum of History and Technology. The question is not what we have been or are now, but what we will be. For the first time, our productivity is not increasing. Productivity is not some esoteric economic subject. It is how much we produce and how much it takes to produce it. The object is to make more for less. If you do, everyone benefits. Nowhere is that more obvious than in agriculture. If it had not been for increased productivity in agriculture, our lives would be entirely different.
Deep in the jungle of the Philippines, the Tassidae, a Stone Age tribe, spend all their time looking for food. It is the only work they do. The Tassidae do not farm. They take all their food from nature. At one time, all humans survived this way. Until someone got the idea of farming, the search for food was the full-time, all-consuming human occupation. Without agriculture, we would still be in the Stone Age, spending every waking moment trying to find enough to eat. So agriculture, in one sense, is the basis of all industry. And nowhere is agriculture more productive than in the United States. Every American farmer feeds 109 people, 4 times as many as the French, 10 times as many as the Soviets, 25 times as many as in India. It is what we do best. It is not all we do well. About 25 years ago, a computer could cost $1 million and fill a room. Anything that computer could do, this chip can do. It cost $6 or $7. For a while, no nation came close to the United States in computer technology. The Japanese, for instance, came to the field late, but they came well prepared. In a recent American study of one type of integrated circuit, the brains of a computer, the best American product failed 6 times more often than the best Japanese product, 6 times. Built-in quality and reliability pushed Japanese productivity up and American productivity down. Productivity is also pushed down by the size of our government and its requirements. This is one piece of government paper being approved for publication. It is estimated that it costs our economy $100 billion and millions of hours a year to fill out government reports and comply with government regulations.
Our rate of productivity gain, which...
Dean Herbert Striner of the Kogod Business School at American University has established a productivity study center to look into those areas and others. One of their problems is that not all sectors of the economy have a productivity measure. Striner says whatever the measurement problems, it's obvious that we are being hurt.
The degree to which we have too low a level of productivity and we are losing markets to other countries which are more productive is robbing us of income just as effectively as inflation.
I'd like to know how we're standing.
Within the federal government, only one corner of the Commerce Department is concerned with productivity. The Assistant Commerce Secretary for Policy is Jerry Jasanowski. He says there has been too little cooperation between industry and government, but that's only one of the problems.
In the 1960s, we had a golden period. Economic growth was moving ahead. We didn't have energy problems. People were consuming more, both business and consumers. Then we had some things happen in the 70s to which we never really adjusted. And we continue to consume far beyond our means, both publicly and privately.
The ratio of R&D to our gross national economy, our gross national product, has been dropping. Other countries in the world have maintained higher levels of expenditures in research and development.
We package these foods so they're in 18 different varieties for the convenience of the housewife. We keep the stores open till 10 o'clock at night and sometimes 24 hours a day, even though there's really no economic basis for justifying that.
The price of a barrel of crude oil is essentially the same for Japan, Germany, and the United States. So that we can't lean on that crutch and say that it's strictly energy that's been causing us all of these troubles.
We've lived on the short-term, fairly immediate gratification of getting the consumption goods we wanted or getting the nice high return in capital profits rather than thinking about long-term investment.
In this country, typically what happens when the steel industry goes to Congress or to the Treasury people to shorten the periods of depreciation so that they can write off equipment more rapidly. The response is usually, you're just going to have to take it out of profits. Well, if the profit level doesn't permit it, then you're left with a steel industry that can't modernize. Part of what happens in Japan is that the government will sit down with the manufacturers and determine what can we do to help you, what can we do to cooperate for the benefit of the entire economy. While here we have this adversarial relationship, this clean, clear demarcation that we so love between government and industry, except, of course, that it doesn't really exist in many cases. The difference, perhaps, is that we tend to help industry after they've reached the point of going bankrupt.
The majority of American businessmen have tended to be reactive in the 1970s rather than progressive in showing the kind of initiative we need in order to deal with these problems.
The simplest way to put it is that when we're discussing the new environmental control regulations concerning engines, the American manufacturers tend to be thinking immediately about how to put it off, how to stop it, which congressman to contact, while the people from Toyota, Honda, VW are busy trying to figure out how soon do they get back so that they get their research people, their production people, working on the problem of meeting these specifications.
I remember the first few months that I was president, sitting in the cabinet room over just adjacent to the Oval Office, talking to the leaders of the American automobile manufacturing firms, all of the leaders there, all the firms represented, encouraging them to comply with the impending legislation in the Congress to require the production of small and efficient automobiles for the American market. Their unanimous reply was that this was an inappropriate thing for them to do, that the market was not there for the small and efficient automobiles.
We were caught terribly short in this country when Honda came here and said, oh yes, we have an engine that will meet all of your pollution controls, the regulations, and we'll use leaded gas, unleaded gas, you know, you can put chicken soup in it.
We have to change the relationship between management and workers in many firms to draw out the contributions that workers want to make to the productivity problem.
We clash. We're aggressors. I'm talking about management and union. We're fighting all the time.
There is a credibility problem. Even when you try to affect communications clearly, and lay all the cards on the table, you have this credibility problem. They're going to keep asking questions. They're more sophisticated.
Today, you know, you can take and smoke a weed or whatever they want to call it in the restroom or something for a few minutes, and that's all it takes. And so we have a lot of those problems in the plants today.
Somehow I wanted to do that job when I raised my hand and said, I want it. When I got past the door, all I could figure out was get my money and the heck with anything else.
We tend to view workers as major assets when they're employed, but a major drag on the economy when they're unemployed. Then they suddenly become welfare cases. We're very unhappy about the fact that they're unemployed, but we do very little in the way of retraining to upgrade their skills.
On the problem of management, some of it had to do with the fact that American management had lost some of its willingness to take risk and had turned to shorter-term payoffs rather than longer-term payoffs. That one study that you're talking about will look at the incentive structure.
We would look at that. The study that we hope to contract out will focus pretty much on the chief executive officer, the fact that his compensation is tied to last year's profits, and so he will have very little incentive to invest in R&D that has a 10-year payoff. CEOs are increasingly coming from financial and controller backgrounds where the financial officer is moving up to the CEO position, and he just may not have that commitment to improving that particular line of business the way someone who had been in the business for a long period of time would have.
There are over 200 Japanese companies operating in the United States today using American workers, and apparently based on the product they're turning out, the product is fine, they're doing well, and it's not the American worker, as far as I can determine. That's a major part of the problem of productivity.
We all want clean air, we all want clean water, and in the 1960s we passed an enormous number of rules and laws to get that.
I don't think that, from all of the studies I've seen, that government regulation has imposed a sufficient additional cost to account for the major difference between a 10% increase in productivity in Japan and an almost 0% increase that we're running at the present time.
With 27 different agencies, each having their own little fiefdom, and promulgating dozens of rules a month, which impinge upon the businessman who's standing there trying to look out 5 years, gauge what's happening in the international market, decide what to do about his energy supplies, and at the same time phase in this regulation, or these 20 regulations. And the problem is that it introduces an extraordinary amount of uncertainty into the business planning process.
Jarzynowski's comments are mild compared to what businessmen say about government regulation, particularly small businessmen, when they get together for a conference.
In order to comply with federal Drug Administration rules, we're being compelled to spend roughly $500,000 to modify our plant.
I could use 2 more people just on my staff, very competent people, reading and interpreting all of these documents and filling out stacks of papers on our chemical products and then submitting them back to Washington.
So I called the district manager and I said, I've been cited for an ungrounded electric typewriter, and yet the nameplate says double insulated. And he said, does it? I said, yes, it does. He said, well, the boys shouldn't have cited you then. And I said, well, thank you very much. Will you relieve me of that citation? He said, oh, no, I can't do that. You have to appeal.
For example, we have a stairway in one of our plants, and they made us move the handle 1/4 inch so people with thick fingers could grab it more readily.
Mr. Lockwood, he said, I know you feel bad. But we got a call the other day from an individual in Los Angeles who had been cited for an ungrounded electric typewriter, as you had. And it turns out that he had a manual typewriter.
George Lockwood's business is along the Monterey Bay of California, and he may have been put into business by sea otters, a protected endangered species who eat abalone, all they can get. So over the years, the number of abalone harvested for people went down and the price went up. It is now more than $15 a pound. Lockwood and some associates moved into an old sardine factory on the coast to see if they could raise abalone the way farmers raise chickens. It was an entirely new field, but solving technical problems and raising abalone turned out to be a lot easier than dealing with government regulation.
We have 42 identifiable government agencies that interact into our decision-making, requiring permits, requiring reports, requiring compliance with their particular area of the law.
Do you have any specific examples of where government regulation has gotten in your way?
It is, for instance, illegal for my abalone to go potty in the water without a permit.
That sounds insane.
We still are required to have the permits and file the reports and to comply with the law, the same if we were the sewage treatment plant.
How long does it take you to get it?
It took us in excess of 6 months, from beginning to end. And we are constantly running into difficulty with our fish and wildlife protection agencies because they don't want superior strains of abalone growing in areas where they can interact with wild stocks.
But if they are in your lab, how do they interact with the wild stock?
Well, they're afraid they might escape somehow.
What have been your experiences with OSHA?
It's been a disaster. I've spent over 1,000 hours of my time appealing on ill-founded citations which we've received. The National Electric Code, which is the basic building code of America, allows the use of certain types of electrical cable in certain places. The OSHA inspector saw it. I said, what's wrong with it? He said, a man could be electrocuted. I said, that man would have to be 20 foot tall to touch that cable. He said, I don't care, it's against the code. I was cited and presumably responsible for spending some $40,000 to rewire our building. Fortunately, on appeal, better minds prevailed and we were not required to do that. We have one agency that makes a regular inspection here. The inspector is required to be here for 4 hours. The first time that he came, after 15 minutes, he said, Mr. Lockwood, I've completed my inspection, everything is fine. And he began to talk about baseball. And after a few minutes, I said, thank you very much, have a nice trip home, good safe trip home. Nice to meet you. And he said, Mr. Lockwood, he said, I'm required to spend 4 hours in this inspection. If you want me to go back and inspect, I can do some more inspecting, and I'm sure I'll find something wrong. On the other hand, we can spend the rest of the time talking about baseball.
You sound as if you are saying that the people who regulate you, in some instances at least, simply do not understand what you are doing.
When these laws were passed, they had no idea that new things were going to come along that they would impact on. So we now have the job of going back in basically some 42 areas of government interaction, educating the lawmakers and the regulators as to what we're doing and convincing them that there is no harm that's going to result, as was originally contemplated when the laws and regulations were passed to stamp out some other evil.
Lockwood, who is also experimenting with kelp as a high-protein source, says regulations fall more heavily on small businesses because they can least afford to fight them. And he says regulations are too often written to maintain things as they are, that they do not encourage innovation and experimentation, which is most often done by small companies.
We are that new cutting edge of food-producing technology that is struggling to get started now. It's interesting that aquaculture is emerging in other countries such as Japan much more rapidly than here in America. And once you look at the reasons why, it's quite easy to discern. We have a substantial blockage that's put in our way by a wide diversity of government regulatory agencies with which we have to deal with, that's preventing us from applying science that already exists towards the useful end of producing fish, shellfish, and plants for human consumption.
Lockwood and other businessmen insist that the government must have rules and regulations, that people have a right to pure drugs, pure food, clean air and water, and some reasonable guarantee of safety. It is not the regulations they oppose, but the way they are administered. For instance, Lockwood complains bitterly about OSHA and the way its inspectors demand that everything be done precisely by the book. OSHA does not see it that way. After detailing the 5 safety visits to Lockwood's small plant, an OSHA official concluded, quote, the evidence seems to indicate that Mr. Lockwood should thank the state for assisting him in making his workplace a safer place for his employees. It is obvious that the United States economy is not in good shape. Increasing productivity will not make it all rosy again. It will not cure inflation and recession, but it will make them better. And it is certain that decreasing productivity will make them worse. Japan is the 3rd most productive nation in the world, but it now has the highest rate of productivity increase. We taught them how to do that after World War II. In those days, no one knew more about productivity than we did. No more. Now, a frequent speaker on productivity at business and industrial conferences in the United States is Joji Arai.
15,000 Japanese executives visited the United States to exchange views and ideas with you. They learned a great deal. 20 executives went to Japan from the United States last year under our auspices.
The Japan Productivity Center in Washington.
Good afternoon.
Last year, the Productivity Center helped 20 American businessmen who went to Japan and 450 Japanese who came to the United States.
Talk to people. After all, we all learn from each other.
His September schedule looks pretty full. And
the Washington office of the Productivity Center opened in 1962 and has helped more than 16,000 Japanese businessmen make contact with their American counterparts. Joji Arai has headed the office since it opened and seems perfect for the job. Arai has lived in the United States since 1960, but he is not the first of his family to come here. Arai's father was educated and worked here, so Arai grew up in Japan hearing stories of the United States. He now lives in suburban Washington, and his friends say his knowledge of the United States is detailed and extensive. Mr. and Mrs. Arai have 3 children. 2 of them were born here, and all of them are growing up and being educated here. All of that, from his father to his children, makes Arai uniquely qualified to compare Japan and the United States. For recent years, the comparison is not comforting.
Japan is a country about 1/25th the size of the United States. She is a nation without natural resources, and she depends upon the overseas supply, 90% of her energy and raw material. Yet Japan is now the 3rd most productive nation in the world, after the United States and the USSR. Japan's industries registered an increase of 8% in 1978 and 11.4% in 1979. In the meantime, U.S. productivity growth rate hovered around 0.
If Mount Fuji is a recognized symbol of Japan, then one of the Japan productivity centers at the base of Fuji ought to be a symbol of their industry. Established in 1955, the center has trained thousands of company and union personnel, sent study teams abroad, published reams of material, and done anything it could to make productivity a household word. And it has worked. The center is partly financed by the government, but its directors are a who's who of industry and labor. It has been so successful that Americans are now going to the center to learn how it was done from Kohei Goshi, the chairman. This group of personnel officers from Westinghouse and their consultant were told by the chairman, through an interpreter, how the center was created to exchange technical information with the United States, and he spoke of Japan's economy after World War II.
At that time, the per capita income of Japanese people was about $200 US. At present, it is now $8,000 US. And the consensus among Japanese people at that time was to get out of the state of being a beggar.
Japan no longer begs from anybody. It doesn't have to. This steel mill on a man-made island in Tokyo Bay is the world's most modern. There is nothing else like it anywhere. Using the latest in technology, NKK, Japan's second largest steel company, opened the Ogishima works starting in 1976. It is computer-controlled and so highly automated that it can produce more steel than the plant it replaced with fewer than half the workers. It cost $3 billion and took almost 10 years, but it tripled the average productivity of each worker. Tripled. The equipment that this replaced was 30 years old. Some steel equipment still used in the United States is 50 or more years old. American companies have some difficulty raising the capital to buy new equipment. Japanese companies do not have that problem. They plow back more of their profits, and there is more money available to borrow.
The propensity of workers to save over 20% of their disposable income at financial institutions help the companies to borrow money, as debt financing has been the most prevalent mode of expansion in Japan. In addition, many Japanese companies, rather than aiming for a higher profit to be shared among stockholders, plowed back the fund in expanding and renewing their plants and equipment. These efforts by companies enable them to lower the average age of machinery in all industries to 7 years, as compared to 12 years in the United States.
Using modern computer-controlled machines has helped Japan's auto industry flourish while ours is in decline. For example, Mazda made 740,000 cars in 1974. That year it had 37,000 workers. Last year it had only 27,000 workers, but it turned out 1 million cars. Productivity, more for less. That has taken a heavy capital investment. 80% of Mazda's annual investment goes to increase productivity or develop new products. But significantly, 20% of the money goes for pollution control. Pollution standards for the auto industry in Japan are more severe than they are in the United States. But while our auto industry is floundering, theirs is reporting record profits. And part of those profits come from making vehicles under license for non-Japanese companies. Their auto and most other industries were built to fill domestic needs, and only after that were they exported. And it was all done with next to no natural resources.
The only abundant natural resource Japan has is people.
Japan's industries take care of their workers in ways almost unknown in the United States, everything from cut-rate family stores to lifetime employment. Japanese factory workers not only have exercise breaks to ease the monotony, but often meet in the mornings to sing the company song and exhort each other to do better. They know that even in bad times, they will not be let go or laid off. And in return for job security, they give their companies incredible loyalty. The companies care not only about their workers' job performance, but about their health, their family life, and their ideas for doing things better. Good ideas can win a Canon camera worker a paid vacation and a cash bonus.
Parts are supplied on the belt.
Visiting Americans like the Westinghouse Group are always impressed with the loyalty between Japanese companies and their workers. It is uniquely Japanese, and it may be the only thing in their industry that is.
Japanese are not as creative as European or American. On the list of 100 outstanding inventions in the world in the past 50 years, you will find only a few Japanese achievements.
That too is changing. While in the United States, the number of patent applications is going down, here at the Japanese Patent Office, the number of Japanese applying for patents has almost doubled in 10 years, despite a $20 fee with each application. The Japanese are now moving into new fields, so they are turning out new ideas almost as fast as they have been turning out steel and cars and television sets. The Japanese are quick to support new industries that show good potential, sunrise industries. They are equally quick to cut loose sunset industries, old industries that are growing less profitable, the kind Congress supports. And the Japanese protect the worker.
Japan is suffering from slow economic growth. Our unemployment rate, however, still remains around 2%.
5 years ago, Mitsubishi's Hiroshima shipyard used 11,000 tons of steel a month. Now it uses 2,000. The government decided that, as a matter of national policy, Japan should reduce its shipbuilding capacity and turn that to something else, such as building drilling rigs for oil exploration. Mitsubishi's Hiroshima yard cut its workforce by 1,700, but no one was fired or laid off. This oil rig, now off New Jersey's coast, was built by some of the shipyard workers. Others were transferred to other Mitsubishi operations or loaned to other industries. Either way, their jobs were safe, and the company moved into a new, expanding, and profitable field of foreign trade.
The Ocean Ranger was designed by Otico engineers. The Japanese would build it faster and less expensive and do as good a work.
Out of an old business and into a new one with no layoffs and minimum loss. The Japanese do so well at some things that it is tempting to believe they do well at all things. They don't.
When it comes to agriculture in Japan, productivity seems to fall apart. The distribution system passes food from hand to hand for no apparent reason except to raise the price to the consumer. That's at the end of the line.
At the beginning of the line, more than half of Japan's farms are less than 2.5 acres. Small family farms that are not efficient. So Japan has to import 1/4 of all its food and more than half of all its grain. An auction of fresh fruits and vegetables may be colorful and exciting and make fascinating pictures, but it is a clumsy way to distribute food. And the auction is only part of Japan's food distribution problem. The traditional mom-and-pop grocery store may keep a whole family employed, but it makes the food cost more. But supermarkets, which are more efficient, are beginning to spread, and they are only a tiny part of what Japan has adopted from the United States.
First of all, let me tell you that productivity game was taught us by Americans. We are very fortunate to have America as a good teacher, and we always try to be a very good student, and that's what made it possible for us to be somewhat competitive in the international market with U.S. industries.
The first time that I went there to teach industry, I taught 450 engineers in several cities, Tokyo, Nagoya, and Fukuoka.
W. Edwards Deming first went to Japan in 1950 to teach industrial productivity through statistical analysis. He was so successful that Japan's annual award for productivity is called the Deming Prize. It is one of the most coveted awards in Japan, and the medal that goes with the award is a profile of Dr. Deming, an American. The 1979 Deming Prize went to the Hiroshima plant of JSW, Japan Steel Works, which was so proud it had Deming's note of congratulation etched on a block of stone outside the plant headquarters. 2,000 men and women work at that plant, and JSW provides recreational facilities for them to use when they're off. That is standard with major plants, even in crowded industrial areas. When the game is over, work resumes making industrial machines and devices, including huge ball valves for pipelines. The quality of the work is so high that there are only 6 people in the plant's quality control department. The production workers build in quality and make an average 10 suggestions per worker each year on how to do it even better. Reliability, the one word that tells it all. That's the motto of Fujitsu. The company makes computers and telecommunications equipment, and the workers are organized into quality control groups, QC circles, as they are throughout Japanese industry. The Japanese believe in consensus, with workers and managers participating in and agreeing on the best course. In that way, when a decision is made, everyone supports it. Visiting Americans always want to see a QC circle meeting. Traditionally, in the United States, there is little participation and no consensus. Top management issues orders, everyone else takes orders. Despite modernization, not all machines in Japan are new. This one has been renovated to fit into a highly automated system for Matsushita. It is one of the world's largest companies, making electronics and home appliances, in this case, refrigerators. The beginning of the plant is the longest fully automated assembly line in the world. With fewer than 900 production workers, the plant turns out 4,000 refrigerators a day. And to ensure that each meets the quality standards, the factory makes almost all the parts itself. The assembly line is computer controlled, and Matsushita says it is the largest, most modern refrigerator plant in Japan. As much time and money as Matsushita has put into equipment, it still considers its most critical area of management employee relations. Despite advanced automation, no worker has been laid off, so workers have suggested some of the automated machines now in use, including this automated packer. And with the limited population in Japan, more industries are turning to automation out of necessity.
In order to cope with the shortage of labor and reduce the cost of production, Japanese manufacturing industry initiated the dramatic onslaught to automate the production line by extensive use of computer-assisted machines.
In several plants, the third shift each day is run entirely by computer-assisted machines. There are no people. In this type of advanced machinery, the Japanese are moving much faster than their American counterparts. There are 45,000 computer-controlled robots in use in Japan. There are only 5,000 in the United States, despite the fact that the robot was an American invention. But the Japanese have developed their own machines. Matsushita made this one for its television operation. It is faster and better and relieved workers from tedious jobs so they could work mentally as well as physically. Matsushita officials say machines should do the repetitive labor and people should do what requires thought. One of the things they think about is how to make better machines to do the work, how to increase productivity. There are signs, slogans, and exhortations in every Japanese factory. Between the two world wars and for a while after World War II, Japanese industry was famous for only one thing, producing shoddy goods and cheap junk. But in the 30 years since 1950, Japan has gone from being a producer of trash to a nation synonymous with quality and reliability. Japan now sets industrial standards, standards that used to be measured by American products. The difference was a commitment to productivity, involving everyone. This foreman, for instance, spends one day a week going over suggestions for improvement made by the workers under him. For its part, management has invested in new technology and equipment and learned techniques of management that encourage productivity. It has all been part of a national goal. To reach that goal, the Japanese hired Americans to teach them what to do and how to do it. Japan's industrial success was made in the USA, and the success is spectacular. In a modern Japanese factory, watching workers bawl out their colleagues for poor performance, it is difficult to remember that when the American occupation ended in 1952, the Japanese were not dominant at anything. 28 years later, they dominate several industries and are moving up rapidly in some others. The United States supplies Japan with agricultural goods and raw materials and imports finished products. Whether we like it or not, that is the definition of a colony. In 28 years, they have completely reversed the two economic roles. That did not happen by magic. QC circles, new plants and equipment, different management techniques, worker training programs, all take money, dedication, and a lot of time. Americans taught them what to do and how to do it, but the Japanese actually did it brilliantly. Now, with our productivity in decline, more American companies are sending officials to Japan to see for themselves.
I've been in a lot of industrial plants in the U.S. in the past 20 years, but I'd say very, very few of them would compare to those that we've seen in the past 2 weeks.
Do you think quality control circles will work in American industry?
I think they'll work in the United States, but I think it's important to realize that the success the Japanese are having with quality circle programs now is the product of over a decade of evolution. It didn't happen overnight.
I never tried it until I came to Japan, but it's delicious.
They all work very, very closely together. Their bottom line is not what is in it for me, but what's in it for us.
That's right.
After watching here the people at work, the quality of product, the cooperation between government and business and labor, and working together for the good of this nation, we have to do the same thing.
If we intend to compete internationally, unless we can change some attitudes and ideas fairly quickly, why, time's not on our side.
If Americans saw what we have seen these past 2 weeks, they would be considerably less comfortable.
If Americans are made less comfortable by seeing what is happening in Japan, they might be made more comfortable by seeing that there are plants in the United States where productivity is going up. That is our next subject.
IC 問題が一つありまして、かなりのセットがホールドになっておると。
As you know, in order to increase our production quantity,
This is the weekly management meeting of a manufacturing plant in the suburbs of Chicago. The plant is owned by Matsushita, the Japanese electronics and home appliances giant, but most of its top management is American, including its president, Richard Kraft. Matsushita bought the failing plant from Motorola and turned it around.
Bud, we have a little report from production.
I'd like to refer to the charts up on the wall, our productivity charts. 1979 showed an improvement over 78.
Under Machusta, there are about 4 defects for every 100 television sets
We
made.
started our night shift the first of the year.
Under Motorola, for every 100 sets, there were 150 defects.
Productivity will improve weekly.
It was pretty evident in those last few years with Motorola that the corporation was not really putting their best effort forward to make the consumer products division successful.
For one thing, the assembly line was outdated, and the production workers had to keep up with the set to do their work. That caused mistakes. Machusta installed a new assembly line so that each worker could stop the circuit board, do what had to be done, and send it on. They don't have to chase it to work on it. Incidentally, the workforce making Quasar sets for Machusta is essentially the same group that made Motorola sets. Some new Machusta machinery to automate and speed circuit board building has been installed. Even though it is older, slower, and smaller than similar machines in Japan, it is technological progress.
The ones I have here.
And production workers are more involved. Each week, each line meets with its foreman to hear what the company is doing and what it plans. It isn't quite a QC circle, but it is worker participation.
Plant promotion program, Mary Lou? Yes, and they posted up.
We basically believe in the concept of dealing directly with our people. We like to feel close to our people. We like to keep them informed. We like to hear from them about their problems and ideas. And this is very much in tune also with Japan.
So are the employees' quality signs around the plant and their recreational program.
I'd like to inform the group as well that our annual spring fashion show is well on its way. And the theme this year will be stepping in style now and then.
I try wear the kimono.
That's something we haven't tried yet, wearing a kimono.
Right.
For years now, the American steel industry has been losing business to the Japanese, who could produce a ton of steel with fewer men for less money. Now some of that business is starting to come back, attracted by American mills that are small, modern, and beat even the Japanese at producing more for less.
We make steel at a lower cost than any steel company in the world, including the Japanese.
The plant at Norfolk, Nebraska is one of 10 owned by Nucor, a profitable non-union steel company.
We build plants very economically, and secondly, we run them very, very efficiently. The primary thanks to that goes to the employees themselves and the incentive production systems.
Nucor also invests heavily in modern technology, plowing back part of the profits to buy new equipment and experiment with new methods and machine improvements. Iverson believes technology is important, but not as important as people. And people, he believes, want to be rewarded for their work, so when they produce more, he pays them more.
Our production workers work on a production incentive system. They are groups of about 30 people who are doing some complete task, such as producing a certain number of rolled tons. If they exceed that standard in a week, then they receive extra pay based upon how much they exceeded the standard. It's not unusual for the bonuses to run over 100%. The bonus is paid the next week. There's no maximum on it. The average hourly worker in this plant earned about $22,000 last year. We had melders who earned about $35,000.
The job is good, but the money's great.
Really, the first time that we had a worker who had a group that earned 100% bonus, I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach I might have created a monster, but it really works.
The more steel we make as a crew and roll, the more money we make, and the more money we make, the more money the company makes.
A man doubles his pay, what does he do next?
He doubles it again. There is no cap on it. If they produce again twice as much, the bonus would go to 200%. We never change the standard.
Could the huge steel mills do it?
Yes.
by designing incentives which properly reward workers when they produce added amount of production. I think there's one problem, though, in this country, and that I think many corporate executives are not willing to do it. I think if they'll give lip service to the fact that if a man does twice as much, I'll pay him twice as much. But if he does, and it comes down to it, they'll either say the standard was wrong or he cheated, or they'll bring their consultants in to say it for them.
Because of the bonus system, new Corps workers are critically interested in production.
It's the people's attitudes here. You look around and you talk to everybody, it's all production. You know, if we want to get production up, if we break down or break out, whatever, on the caster, everybody is kind of running around trying to get things going.
We're looking for that performance-oriented person who, one, has goals, and secondly, sees the reward in those goals, and that's what he's looking for.
I like the incentive bonus program probably the best. The job security is another big item to me.
We have not laid off a single employee for lack of work for more than 10 years.
No one?
No one.
Modern equipment, production bonuses, job security, and everyone makes a profit, including the United States.
For the last 4 years, our price, FOB, which is leaving this plant, has been equal or less than the Japanese price of steel landed dockside in the United States. Actually, most of our market has come from taking that market that used to belong to foreign steel producers.
Speaking of the Japanese, have they ever toured any of your facilities?
Yes, they've been in this plant.
Did they like it?
Yes, they said it was one of the most productive plants they had ever seen.
From the steel mill to the grocery store, this one a giant food store in suburban Maryland.
Whatever happened to the cash register?
It's gone. It's outdated.
The customers like this?
Yes, they really do. It takes them a little while to get used to it, generally a couple of weeks, and then they won't go anywhere else because they don't want to waste the time in line.
This is faster?
Definitely.
How do they know what they've bought?
Well, the receipt tape, we have two ways. First of all, they just display up here. You see giant plastic bags, $1.19. That's first of all. And then second of all, everything that you just bought is on here. There's the leeks, lunch bags, lemon juice, apple juice, V8.
Doesn't it feel funny when you don't have your cash register to...
No, I don't miss it at all. No.
I see.
It's like a horse to a rocket ship.
When the company's computer system is completed, each store's checkout computer will be linked to this central warehouse computer, and stock shipments will be automatic. It is already partially automated, and the gain in Giant Food's productivity has been dramatic. To the delight of the union, the warehouse workforce has gone up almost 50%. To the delight of the company, the work being done has gone up more than 100%. Productivity. About 15 million pieces of mail go through the General Post Office in New York every day. Working by hand, one person can sort about 30 pieces each minute. It is demanding, tiresome, lonesome, and often puzzling work. New keyboard sorters are twice as fast, and the operators work to music. The machines are a productivity improvement, as was the zip code. And if the radio music helps the operators, that too contributes to post office productivity. And to increase the rate of sorting from 30 letters a minute to 60 is a good stunt. But it doesn't come close to this optical character reader, which can sort 750 pieces of mail every minute, 45,000 per hour, and needs only a few people to operate. With equipment like this, each postal worker here handles half again as much mail as he did 10 years ago. In Detroit, this is a familiar sight. The city garbage truck with a driver and 2 men to pick up and load. And as wages increase, the cost of garbage collection increases. So the city began to move to one-man garbage trucks in 1976. There are now 25 of these in service and 70 more on order. With the loading bin on the side near the front and the steering wheel on the right, collecting garbage becomes much more efficient. Detroit officials say a one-man truck picks up as much garbage as a 3-man truck. The Donnelly Mirror Company in Holland, Michigan is well known in industrial circles for its gains in productivity and its success in the marketplace. The company makes automotive mirrors and glass and specialty glass. It is non-union, but operates on a bonus and worker participation plan first suggested by a steel union official in the late 1930s. The plan is organized into teams to figure out better ways to do the work, and everybody gets a share of any productivity profits. Arlen Lanton, Donnelly's president, presides over a monthly meeting of workers where almost anything can be discussed. Because the plan is organized into interlocking teams with information passing up and down among them, everyone in the plant always knows what is happening and what is likely to happen. No one feels left out or ignored.
We want people involved. We want them to know what's going on. We want them to see what they're doing, how that relates to what the corporation's doing.
Participation. We all help, we all are stimulated and motivated by it to do as much as we can.
Workers at Donnelly even come up with ways to eliminate jobs. But if the job is eliminated, the worker isn't. He gets another job.
We used to have only one Dynacast machine, what they call, but due to the fact that we had so much time left, I did ask quite a few times, and we finally got my way that they ordered a second machine. It was a lot cheaper for the company, for we could operate 2 machines in the same time as what we used to do with 1 machine. It doubled the production, saves a lot of time and energy. Any kind of wild idea, what they call, bring them up. They will look into it, and if it's possible, they will make it work.
Along with productivity increases, Donnelly has benefited by taking risks to develop and market new products.
We've come up with an innovative opera window for the automotive industry, because before this time they'd have to get in the car and assemble an opera window, and it was a very difficult job. So we developed a window where you can stand outside the car and just pop it in and put 3 or 4 screws into the particular window and it would be assembled. For them it was a cost reduction. They liked it. For us it was a whole new area for our company, and it's our objective now to be a world leader in opera windows.
An opera window is the small window used in limousines, but they are becoming increasingly popular in small sports cars. Donnelly is already a major supplier of automobile mirrors worldwide and is moving ahead in coated glass. After 5 years of effort, it recently got an order from Japan.
Quality is very, very sacred and very important to the Japanese. It doesn't impress them much what the rest of the world is doing concerning quality. They'll just nod and say, that's fine, but here's what we want. And they've really helped upgrade our whole quality level. They seem very dedicated. They're very tenacious on productivity. They're doing some things right. How come they can do it and we can't?
Donnelly is an established company. Romac Industries in Seattle, Washington is new. And so is its pay system. Production workers vote on each other's raises on the theory that no one knows how well you work better than the people who work with you.
Bob, when you decided you wanted a raise, what did you do?
Well, I went into the plant manager and asked him for a raise slip.
And you write also how much you want, more an hour.
Everything I said was real sincere about what I was saying.
I put in my quality and quantity is up to level.
It was up there a week.
And who votes? All the employees here.
The people that you work with see you more than your managers do.
And I got voted in for it.
11 to 3.
And you got your raise?
Yeah.
Which was unanimous, 15 to 2.
What we wanted to do is involve our people.
Hi, Ray.
Hello, Joe. We want them to be cognizant that productivity and conscientiousness and relating one to the other are all part of our jobs.
The voting system was part of a 5-point plan to improve relations after Romac faced 2 union elections in 1 year. A second part was a monthly meeting between worker representatives and the company president. No foremen are allowed, no question is prohibited.
We have dates set up for the office crew to come out into the shop. You are going to be first.
And once a year, every officer of the company must spend a day working in the shop. McNeil doesn't want any official to forget where the profits really come from.
When?
Yeah.
6:30 till 3.
Romac Industries makes waterworks pipe fittings, a specialized but potentially highly profitable business. And another part of the Romac plan is profit sharing, so that everyone benefits from everyone else's work, a clear reward for group effort. McNeil, who started Romac doing his own work, is convinced this system builds productivity and trust.
Can I do that?
Yeah? I'll give you that one. You want to finish
McNeil says the idea of his plan is to eliminate the traditional labor management adversary relationship.
Well, you sure do it faster than I do, so holding a whole handful.
I do it faster than anybody because I'm at it all the time.
Okay. I bet I can run faster than you can.
Building automobiles is considered a typically American industry, but it is in deep trouble. Different companies are reacting in different ways. Chrysler at Belvidere, Illinois, is taking advantage of advances in technology, like these robot welding machines. Oldsmobile at Lansing asked its workers how the assembly line could be made more efficient and adopted some of the suggestions, including this wide belt that lets the worker move with the car. At Buick's complex at Flint, axle plant 31 was about to close. The old-style axle was to be phased out anyway, and the plant had a poor labor record. Plant management and the union local agreed to cooperate without a formal program to try to get new axle business and keep the plant open.
We had to be competitive to get new business in because we're about to lose some 1,200 jobs on the axle business. And we set an objective to bring in business and to replace those jobs.
And I felt that with their sincerity of bringing us some work in here, we would then look at trying to cooperate to see that we couldn't, I said we could do this work as good as anybody at any other UAW plant or anywhere else.
Some 3 years later, the axle is totally phased out. We have replaced that business with X-car business. It's called a trailing axle. And today we have roughly 1,300 people, where we had some 1,200 that would have otherwise lost their job.
Our employment today in 31.
General Motors is now involved in quality of work-life programs, which can be described as democracy in the working place.
Remember, the competition is
QWL programs are designed to improve the product by increasing worker participation and involvement and making the worker's life better.
with high stakes, our jobs.
Quality work life is people-oriented. It's human. GM, in my own opinion, got involved in it through fear. Why they got involved, I don't really care. It's the goal that we're after.
The joint thrust of our union, ourselves, and the employees is to improve the quality of the product. When we talk quality of the product, we're talking increased productivity, because if we build it right the first time, we don't have to tear it down, we don't have to repair.
At the Buick assembly plant at Flint, workers meet in employee circles, not unlike the Japanese quality circles, to talk about how to do their work better and make it easier for everyone else. These utility men discuss how to spot and correct defects immediately, and equally important, how to make working at the plant more pleasant.
Can make a world of difference to somebody. What you usually find in there, too, if guys can switch around on the various jobs, I have found this out in the past, it breaks up the monotony of the day, and the day goes by much faster.
The largest and most impressive quality of work-life program is at GM's Terrytown plant. In 1970, it had the worst labor relations and production records of any GM assembly plant. The company was going to close it, but GM and the United Auto Workers agreed to try a QWL program. It took 7 years, enormous patience, hard work, and more than $1.5 million. Was it worth it? Neither the company nor the union wants to say too much, but with the auto industry in a slump, Terrytown is going full blast.
Quality work life is involvement, involving me in the decision-making process, and treating me as somebody. I want to be somebody.
In almost all the solutions to the problem of productivity, there is a common thread. Each of them includes, in some way, worker participation or job security or both. Every expert to whom we talked agreed that no solution can succeed fully unless it includes the active participation of the people who actually do the work, union or non-union. All humans think, and nowhere is it chiseled in stone that those in management think best. We have said several times that much of what the Japanese are doing, we taught them to do. And the man who did most of the teaching is W. Edwards Deming, statistical analyst, for whom Japan's highest industrial award for quality productivity is named. But in his own country, he is not widely recognized. That may be changing. Dr. Deming is working with Nashua Corporation, one of the Fortune 500, a company with sales last year of more than $600 million. Deming was hired in late 1979 by Nashua's chief executive, William E. Conway.
I would say that already we're saving millions of dollars. Well, we've probably improved the overall productivity of the company, something in a few years by 10 to 15%, and that every year thereafter you can get incremental increases in productivity of 4 or 5%. Now, I mean that over and above that which you'd get by normal capital investments or normal changes in machinery and things like that.
Nashua started in New Hampshire in 1904 as a small paper converting company, and coated paper, like this carbonless paper, is still a substantial part of its business. Nashua also makes computer memory disks and other office products, including, starting this year, its own office copying machines. It had worked with a Japanese copy maker, and through that relationship heard about Deming. The company sought him out.
We've applied the Dr. Deming statistical technique to our carbonless coating operation. Once the process was under control, we were able to save up to $500,000 by reducing the coat weight and also maintaining consistent customer quality. And what this also has done is allowed us to free up personnel, make them more available for testing in other areas, which we found to be very important. The statistical approach has allowed us to learn more about the system. Before the use of Dr. Deming's techniques, we were constantly changing the conditions on the coater.
The coater is crucial to the carbonless paper business, so Deming insisted that the machine be allowed to run by itself, then analyzed what the machine would do without human adjustments. It was more complicated than that, but based on the quality level Nashua's customers asked for and the machine's performance on its own, Nashua could change its operation, meet all quality needs, and save money.
After applying these techniques, we're able now to sit back, let the coater operate on its own and make less adjustments to the machine.
If you get gains in productivity only because people work smarter and not harder, that is total profit. And it multiplies several times.
Dr. Deming, who is now 79, and his wife have lived for some years in this house in Washington. His office is in the basement, and Mrs. Deming is one of his assistants. He works constantly and has absolute faith that his system of statistical analysis helps industry. He was equally certain of it when he went to Japan to teach it there.
I think that I was the only man in 1950 that believed that the Japanese could invade the markets of the world and would within 4 years.
If the Japanese were impressed with Deming and his system of quality production through statistical analysis, and they were no more impressed with Deming than he was with them.
What I saw was a magnificent workforce, unsurpassed management, and the best statistical ability in the world. It seemed to me that those three forces could be put together, and I put them together so that Japanese quality, instead of being shoddy, became known within a few years. In less than 4 years, manufacturers all over the world were screaming for protection.
And of course, our major supplier of copy machines was a Japanese company. And so we saw the advantages of many things that Japanese companies were doing, and we'd heard about Dr. Deming, and so we got off and got underway with a quality program with Dr. Deming.
They realized that that the gains that you get by statistical methods are gains that you get without new machinery, without new people. Anybody can produce quality if he lowers his production rate. That is not what I'm talking about. Statistical thinking and statistical methods are to Japanese production workers, foremen, and all the way through the company, a second language.
And what we need is to have Dr. Deming help us learn what the Japanese so successfully have learned.
As part of his program, Dr. Deming teaches practical statistics so that everyone in the plant becomes part of the quality control effort, understanding what has to be done and how to go about doing it. Everyone can participate, everyone gets a say. It encourages company loyalty.
Japan needed to do this for survival, and they did it, and they've done it well. Now we've got to try and learn the things that they've so successfully done.
Japan did it, we can do it.
In statistical control, you have a reproducible product hour after hour, day after day, and see how comforting that is to management. They now know what they can produce. They know what their costs are going to be.
Many of these programs on statistics have died in American companies because they didn't get the top management support. Now, why top management does not believe that this is the way the Japanese have improved their industry over the last 30 years, I don't know.
I think that people here expect miracles. American management thinks that they can just copy from Japan, but they don't know what to copy.
It probably, for the first 6 months, I would say, of the program, I spent half my time, at least half of my time, talking to people, thinking about it, writing memos, joining groups, that they can try to convince them of the importance of this tool and how to use it.
The training that the Japanese workers have could be copied here and is being copied some places, but there's not enough of it.
And even today, probably the top 100, 200 managers in the company are devoting 25 or 30% of their time to nothing but furthering the quality program.
If that sounds like a lot of time and effort, it is. But Dr. Deming never said his system was simple. He only said it would work and it would pay off. In the experience of Nashua so far, it pays off.
Since Monday, the loading and unloading has been much better because Morris, the mechanic.
The Deming system uses statistics to eliminate guesswork. Statistics is not magic, nor is it a science. It is a method of finding out exactly what is happening and what is likely to happen. Once you know that, any competent management can fix what's wrong.
Mesh now, or there's some specific mandrels?
Well, there's one that could use a little, number 2 mandrel could use just a little bit of attention, but other than that, they're pretty good. We have begged for deeper grooves in the trays. They're not deep enough, they don't really grip.
The idea is to establish first what a product should be or a process should do. From then on, if you leave it alone, it is always the same. But the Deming method involves constant monitoring of the system, particularly by the people who do the work. The program to do it better, faster, and easier never stops.
It could be causing aluminum chips in the coating room. So anything like that, be sure you let George know or somebody know.
And once we started to have some success stories, we started to use the people who made the successful programs, talk to other people in small groups and gradually larger groups.
By dropping the handling damage down from 12% to approximately 5%, we are presently saving $30,000 a month. And as our volumes grow in the next 3 or 4 months, we should double that to $60,000 in cost savings a month.
That's $720,000 a year in one area, enough to please any management. But one part of Deming's program is not likely to please them. He insists that management causes 85% of all the problems.
I ask people in management what proportion of this problem arises from your production workers, and the answer is all of it. That's absolutely wrong.
Well, as we got into it, Dr. Deming was right. 85% of the problems were really management problems. It was part of the system, whether it be training, morale, mechanical type things. There weren't that many operators out there that just didn't care.
Inspection does not build the quality. The quality is already made before you inspect it. It's far better to make it right in the first place. Statistical methods help you to make it right in the first place so that you don't need to test it. You don't get ahead by making product and then separating the good from the bad, because it's wasteful. It wastes time of men who are paid wages. It wastes time of machines, if there are machines. It wastes material.
The first thing that we did was to have some posters drawn up to emphasize handling the image, how it was caused, and how we could eliminate it. People just didn't understand how delicate a disc is, that by scratching your fingernail across it, you indeed ruined it so that it couldn't be used again. They went out, our original group grew from 8 to about 15, and it was a lot of peer pressure. You know, they got out on the floor and said, oh, by the way, you're not supposed to be wearing rings while you're handling the discs. You know, that could cause a problem, and explain.
There's just no question, in my mind, that Dr. Deming is the father of the third wave of the Industrial Revolution. Remember the first wave way back with Eli Whitney and the cotton gin and the development of the textile industry in England. And the second wave being in the United States, the large homogeneous market followed up with low unit costs from mass manufacturing with standardization of parts. Now this change to the use of statistics to assist all phases of production, marketing, distribution, what have you, that Dr. Deming talked about, is just as big as either one of those. And anyone who doesn't join that revolution, I think, over time is going to be in serious trouble.
Nobody comes out of the school of business that knows what management is or what its deficiencies are. No one coming out of a school of business that ever heard of the answers that I'm giving to your questions or probably even thought of the questions.
Sounds a little harsh, Doctor.
Yes, I am harsh. I should know what I'm talking about.
Is there an attitudinal difference between the United States and Japan?
They are using statistical methods. They have not only learned them, they have absorbed them, as Japanese absorb other good things of cultures. They are giving back to the world the products of statistical control of quality in a form that the world never saw before.
Would the same methods work in the United States? Could we do the same thing?
Well, of course we could. Everybody knows that we can do it.
Why don't we?
No determination to do it. We have no idea what the right thing to do. Have no goal.
Americans have always believed that wealth is not limited, that the economic pie always expands, and if you want more, you can get it without taking it from anyone else. Other people, British and Swedes, for example, have come to believe that the economic pie is one size, and the only way to have a bigger share is for someone else to have a smaller share. The trouble is that those without want to get more, and those with want to give less, and each side resents the other. That can make for very serious conflict. The American belief of ever-expanding wealth avoids that conflict, but it works only while productivity increases, what Dr. Deming calls working smarter, not harder. Productivity is society's dividend, the payoff for all our work. Increasing productivity pays for fighting society's ills without having to take money away from something else. So what is happening to our productivity now comes at a particularly bad time. As we recognize more human needs and try to meet them, our economy is suffering inflation and recession. The United States has overcome inflation and recession before, but it has never even faced a productivity problem. That is why the United States has been the only industrial country without a national productivity policy. Last February 29th, a start was made. The Office of Productivity, Technology, and Innovation was created in the Commerce Department. Assistant Secretary Jordan Baruch, who heads it, plans to adopt one program from the agriculture industry. Government and business will establish industry-wide best practices programs. That is, everyone will share information on the best way to make something, just as farmers share information on the best way to grow something. The county agent will finally have a counterpart in industry. That's a solution rooted in the American experience rather than a slavish copying of the Japanese. Copying won't work. We are two different societies. They operate by consensus, we by confrontation. That explains why the United States, on a per capita basis, has 20 times as many lawyers as does Japan. And we have more service industries and a huge government sector. Government and service, banking, insurance, restaurants, and that sort of thing, are inherently less productive than manufacturing. We now have more service than manufacturing, and that helps depress our productivity. Manufacturing, making things, is a smaller percentage of our national economy than of any other industrial country, and that makes productivity improvement even more difficult. Until now, probably because the United States was such an enormous and expanding market, productivity has almost automatically increased. So throughout our history, parents have expected their children to live better than they did, and that has always been true. We lived better than did our parents, and they lived better than their parents. Unless we solve the problem of productivity, our children will be the first generation in the history of the United States to live worse than their parents. I'm Lloyd Dobbins, NBC News.